In a deeply distressing turn of events, violence has once again erupted in Gaza, following Israel's unilateral decision to pull out from the ceasefire agreement and resume the horrific butchery of Palestinians in Gaza, completely shattering a relative calm and normalcy that they enjoyed during a 6-week ceasefire agreement just prior to it. Israel showered with bombs the entire Gaza on March 18, 2025 night, on a desperate and tormented, besieged population of Gaza while they were asleep, without warning, which itself is a blatant war crime, massacring nearly 500 people, including 200 children and many among them babies and toddlers. 84 women and many elderly were also killed. Bombs rained down on the makeshift tents and shelters. The power of explosion ripped apart the bodies, and bodies were burned along with the tents. Survivors have to pick up the body parts and charred bodies for burial. This is Ramadan, a massacre in the holy month. This time there is a big difference. The difference is that the massacre was signed off by Trump, and the world remained absolutely silent, because it is Israel doing it with the full support of America, where no world order or international law applies, or even they consider that kind of a law exists. So therefore they can do whatever they want with a total impunity. As per a report presented in the United Nations, on average, 100 people are being killed every day.
Terrified, traumatized, children carried through the debris. Young lives that have already witnessed so much suffering. There's a desperate search for anyone who survived this Israeli strike in the east of Gaza City. Here, a man trapped between huge slabs of concrete.
The reason for the genocidal war to resume, according to Netanyahu, Hamas did not agree to the ceasefire terms, which is an absolute lie, lying without shame. Hamas want to adhere to the original ceasefire agreement, which was a 3-phased ceasefire agreement signed in middle of January 2025. Only phase 1 executed. Netanyahu refused to progress towards the phase 2 of the ceasefire. He wanted to change it on the go, while Hamas wanted to stick to the original agreement. If the ceasefire had continued, that would have resulted in the total release of all hostages, the remains of those dead, and a permanent ceasefire. Both sides would have then enjoyed the peace and claimed victory. The hostages would have gone home, and Gazans would have stopped counting and burying their dead. Listen to what Netanyahu and Trump said sometime during the phase 1 of the ceasefire was in progress.
גם הנשיא טראמפ וגם הנשיא ביידן נתנו גיבוי מלא לזכותה של ישראל לחזור ללחימה. אם ישראל תגיע למסקנה שוט, ונעשה זאת בעוצמה רבה מאוד.
Further, Trump declared within few weeks into the ceasefire that he doesn't believe that ceasefire would continue to the subsequent phases.
And no, I have no guarantees that the peace is going to hold. I have no assurances that it'll hold.
Now the base is well set. Netanyahu, owing to continue the genocidal campaign in Gaza, and his master in White House saying that he is doubtful whether the ceasefire will hold or not, it is just now left to creating conditions for the ceasefire to fail, and then the blame on other side, just like saying that it is Hamas' fault that they did not agree to the ceasefire. Remember that Trump is a person who forced Netanyahu to accept the phase 1 of the ceasefire, and he refused to do that one for enforcing or to continue with the ceasefire subsequently. With no humanitarian aid entering Gaza, the situation is utter desperation and starvation, forcing bakeries and hot meal kitchens to close. The parents are searching for a meal for their children under fire. Mothers go to bed hugging their children without knowing whether they will see the world next day, or how many of them will wake up on the next day. It is hard to imagine the living conditions for ordinary Gazans. Anyone with a normal consciousness would ask which religion or which faith allows forced starvation of an entire population. I am sure none. But the bigger question is that why the international community is allowing this to happen. It seems that Western Arab leaders have become numb with an attitude of, oh, okay, the genocide is still going on. Is it really happening? With no actions initiated against Israel. Let us listen to some relevant parts of the recent media briefing given by UN Secretary General.
More than an entire month has passed without a drop of aid into Gaza. No food, no fuel, no medicine, no commercial supplies. As aid has dried up, the floodgates of horror have reopened. Gaza is a killing field, and civilians are in an endless death loop.
By cutting off the fuel supply, the only desalination plant which was producing water for about 500,000 people also stopped working. So the children in Gaza are starving and dehydrating and crying for food. The world believed that Trump was going to bring peace and end all the wars. But he is just doing the opposite now. Trump forced Netanyahu to accept the ceasefire before his inauguration as a president. As a result, everyone thought that he might be different this time, all to be proved wrong. He said many times that if Hamas doesn't release the hostages, all hell will break out. And he started delivering with Netanyahu what he said. And people.
If they're not back by the time I get into office, all hell will break out in the Middle East.
But if Hamas releases the hostages, then what? Trump never said that if Hamas releases the hostages, then I will bring in peace or enforce ceasefire. He never said that. His rhetoric was one-sided. There was nothing for the other party. So the preparation for the war started much earlier, beginning with Trump providing more and highly powerful weapons and bombs, including 2,000-pound bombs, which can level an entire neighborhood. Removed all the restrictions imposed by Biden on arms sales or arms export to Israel, and approved more and more weapons. A gloves-off approach. And also he told Netanyahu to do it faster and finish up the job, as if Netanyahu was not running fast enough with his genocidal campaigns. So it is easy to destroy a population through forced starvation, sickness and dehydration. That too in the holy month of Ramadan. Shame on those who are forcing such a cruelty on a helpless and tormented population, and nation leaders who are watching in silence, allowing this to happen. But a bigger question remains. If Netanyahu wants to destroy Hamas, then why bomb the women and children when they are asleep? Even if the hostages were released, bombings would and killings of Gazans would have continued, because the stated goal of Israel is the complete destruction of Hamas. So what Netanyahu is shouting to Hamas is, give us all our hostages. Until then, we will bomb and destroy you. None will be spared. But even if you release the hostages, still we will destroy you because you are Hamas. That is irony. Hamas says, okay, take all your hostages in one go, but stop killing us and withdraw your troops. That was the essence of the phase 2 of the ceasefire deal, which all the parties agreed to, but Netanyahu unilaterally pulled out. If you tell your enemy that we will destroy you regardless, what incentives will then they have to give up? Hamas have no incentives to release the hostages without a guaranteed ceasefire. So, all hell started breaking since 18th of March, with carpet bombing of the entire Gaza Strip. The killing continues, worsening every day. No one is spared. Anyone. Around 200 journalists have been killed so far. Targeting journalists is the best way to hide war's cruelty from the world. Israel never allowed independent journalists either. Also targeted paramedics. Recently, Israel occupation forces massacred and buried 15 Palestinian Red Crescent ambulance rescue team and volunteers. They bombed UNRWA school, clinic, sheltering women and children, residential buildings, tents housing displaced people, and so on. The death toll continued to increase by the hour, so there is no point in mentioning the death count now. Despite the Israeli leaders keep announcing that this is only the beginning, the appetizer, and more to come, often making very genocidal statements. Listen to this media interview now.
Residents of Gaza, this is the last warning. The first Sinwar destroyed Gaza, and the second Sinwar will destroy it completely. The airstrike against Hamas terrorists was only the first step. What is coming will be more difficult, and you will pay the price. Soon, the evacuation of residents from combat zones will begin again. If they don't return the Israeli hostages and Hamas is not being removed from Gaza, Israel will act with force like you haven't seen before. Take the advice of the U.S. President, Donald Trump. Return the hostages and get rid of Hamas, and will open new opportunities, including leaving to other places in the world for whoever wants to. The alternative is complete destruction and devastation.
So the Israeli defense minister is asking for Palestinian people or the Gazans to release the hostages and expel Hamas. This is something that they could not even achieve after nearly 1.5 years of brutal war. And he is saying that if they don't do that one, that means the Palestinians or the Gazans will pay the price for that, a full price. So setting conditions that is impossible to achieve, they can continue the war. Further, he is telling the Gazans to take the advice of President Trump and go somewhere else. Well, the plan and motives are very obvious. Firstly, they want to depopulate Gaza, and history tells us that people can only be displaced through war. Israel failed to do that during the first 15 months of war, so they have to restart it again. A forced displacement of people by creating unlivable and unhygienic conditions. Therefore, the population will perish due to disease, unavailability of medical treatment, and forced starvation. Not a drop of potable water or food had entered Gaza since the beginning of March. So the people will be forced to move in search of food, water, and safety. Then call it as voluntary migration. Experts call it as a classical case of ethnic cleansing and genocide. Neither Israel nor America care about where Palestinians go. While both Egypt and Jordan categorically refuse to take any Palestinians. Now Trump and Netanyahu is talking about some African countries to dump them. Ironically, Trump doesn't want Palestinians in America or in Europe either. Netanyahu created a directorate of immigration to facilitate Palestinians to migrate and made none other than Mossad in charge of that particular operations. Now, where is the end and what is going to be the future? This time, most likely there will not be any long-term ceasefire. Gaza will be permanently occupied within military checkpoints, dividing Gaza into zones, because Israelis already started capturing more and more and more territories. And they will create enclaves, heavily restricting the movements and aid delivery, with no permanent ceasefire and putting extreme pressure on the daily survival of the normal people. No meaningful reconstructions, no hospitals, no schools, and Israel may not even allow those who leave to return back, and forcing the people to migrate or perish. So for Gazans, the future looks very bleak, with or without Hamas.